Hi there, welcome to the Man Cave Art Studio. My name's Daryl, and on today's video we'll be looking at the ultimate watercolour paper stretching technique. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about this watercolour stretching technique. I learnt it decades ago and I have never, in the last 3 decades, had any issues with paper buckling when I use this technique. So let's have a look at what we need. First up, of course, is the brown gummed tape. Now you buy this from your local art store. It's not that expensive. It's basically like a big long brown postage stamp where you have to wet the back of it. Now this is not to be confused with the framing tape. I've got a roll of that here. This stuff is like your regular tape that you use, your masking tape, etc. It's actually got an adhesive gum on it and it's sticky. This one isn't sticky until you wet it. So make sure you get the big roll of this, not the brown framing tape. The other thing you need is, I use clay glue. It's an Australian product. It's a wheat-based or a starch-based glue. I haven't used any PVC type glues or anything else. I've always used clay glue because it works and it's cheap. It's basically what they use in kindergarten and school for projects, for scrapbooking, that type of stuff. So wheat-based, starch-based, it's the stuff to use, and we'll have a look at why we use this later on. The other thing you need is a sponge. I like to put my sponge in a little saucer because you're going to be putting water on this, and we use the water to wet the back of the tape when we're putting it on the paper. And the other main thing you'll need is a clean, lint-free cloth. We'll be using this to just wipe off the outside of the paper to give the tape and the glue something nice and firm to stick on. The other thing we'll need is somewhere to stretch the watercolour paper. You can use the bathtub. That's probably not the best. You've got the oils, you've got the soap and other bodily residue in there. So I prefer to use a underbed rolling plastic container. They're cheap. You get them from the local hardware store, and get one big enough to do a half sheet of arches. I use this purely for my watercolour stretching. I always leave the lid on it once it's dried after the stretching so that there's no dust or anything in it, and I'll just put it away in the back of the studio somewhere or under the bed or on top of a cupboard until you need it again. This is a stretched piece of quarter sheet arches, 185 gram, and you can see that this is on a stretcher made from a sheet of masonite with 1 inch by 2 inch pine around the edge at the back. So how are they constructed? This is a stretcher I have for a half sheet size. You can see that I've still got the paper on the outside from the last sheet that I used. This is 3-ply board from the hardware, and on the back you can see I've got the 2 inch by 1 inch pine. It doesn't warp, supports it quite well, and I've never had a problem with this board whatsoever. So it's quite simple. You cut each piece of timber to the width of the board and the length, so you've got 2 of each. Cut them at 45 degrees, and then you can glue them on to the 3-ply board, and just to hold it in place you can even stick some little nails in along the edge where you're not going to have the paper. That's quite good, and no issues whatsoever. So this is another option that I've been using recently. This is a piece of 5-ply from the hardware, and I've sealed the center of the mounting board with white gesso to stop anything leaching through. One thing with using these boards is that you won't end up with the gap between the paper and the board itself, but it's still firm and tight. Just to show you the other options you can use for backing board, this is a piece of 3mm MDF. Once again, it's got the 2 inch by 1 inch pine on the back around the outside. This is a much newer one. You can see that I've got the skills now to cut it at 45 degrees. With this one I chose to have the white board on the back, and then I sealed the front of it with some acrylic spray paint. Once again, no issues. Now I want to talk about what not to do. This is a same type of construction as before. This is MDF. This one I put the white on the outside instead of sealing it. I sanded off the outside where the paper sticks to. That's not an issue. That's it sticks nice and well. The issue was that in order to try and make it lighter and easier to carry around, I only used 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeter pine around the outside, and this doesn't have the structural integrity to stop the board warping. I've tried putting supports in here. This doesn't work. It buckles when the tension of the paper starts pulling it in. So remember, if you're making one of these, use the 1 inch by 2 inch pine on the back. It's not that much more expensive. You're not really saving a lot, and it'll save you a lot of hassles in the future. So here we've got everything set up, ready to stretch the paper. As you can see, I've got my roll of gum tape, I've got my sponge, my clean lint-free cloth, and my glue. Got the board, and the paper is still soaking. Just remember, before you start to stretch your next sheet of paper, just take off the old pieces of paper tape after you've removed the painting that you've done. Just make sure there's nothing loose. You can have a bit of paper there. It provides a nice surface for it to stick to. It's just the loose paper if there's anything that we need to remove. So pick up the Baohong paper, and we've got the X on the back side of the paper here on the non-edge. But then holding it up, I notice now that it's wet, I can see there's a watermark on the bottom of the paper that says Baohong. So because I can read it this way, that means that I've actually put the mark on the front of the paper. That's fine, that's going to be covered by tape, but it actually does have a proper side. So if you get the Baohong paper in the roll, check for the watermark when you're working out how you're going to be laying it on. So I've held it up, I've drained off all the extra water. That's going to be fine. Now I'll just simply line up the 2 corners and let it settle down. Alright, so now it's time to get in and apply the tape. Okay, so the first step is to use the clean cloth and wipe off the excess water from the outside 1/2 inch or so of the paper, working from the middle out. That way you're not going to be buckling the paper at all, especially when it's the lighter grade. This is 300 GSM, not the 185, but there we go. Okay, so the next step is to lay a thin strip of the clay glue just along the outside of the paper here. It doesn't have to be a lot, just a small amount, just to provide assistance to the gum tape. Put that along the edge. You grab your tape, measure it out. You don't have to cut this precisely because this stuff is going to last you a decade easily. Now when you wet the backing of the tape, simply place it down onto your wet sponge, hold your fingers there and drag it through. This makes sure it doesn't get over wet, and then you place it half on, half off of the paper. Grab your cloth and press it down. So then we do this for the other 4 sides. Other 3 sides, sorry. Now I've tried this with without the glue, and although it does work, sometimes the tape can not quite stick properly. So once again, you don't have to be super accurate and neat about cutting the tape to size, because we're just going to trim that off afterwards. Make sure that's nicely done. Third side. And the last side. Now I went a little bit overboard with the glue down the end here, so I'm making this tape a little bit wider to cover up the glue that I placed down. Right, so make sure that's all pressed down firmly. And then we put it aside to dry. So once the paper's dry, we can take a knife and trim off the overhanging tape on the outside of the board just to neaten it up. It's not necessary, but it just makes it a bit neater and a bit nicer to carry and handle. Now the reason this process works is because we've taken the extra water from the outside, we've still got a sheen of water over the center of the paper. And because we've put the extra glue there and we've got the tape, this is going to dry faster than the inside of the paper. So this is a nice solid anchor, and once this dries, it contracts the paper and provides tension, and you'll find that the back of the board, when you look at it, will have a bit of a bow in it because there'll be that much tension in the paper. So it gets to the point where you can do a really heavy wash and your paper will stay dead flat. Now there are people out there that say, why do you go to all this bother? It's a lot of work just to do one painting. But that's the thing. I just don't do one board. I've got a number of stretches, as you've seen previously, and I will just spend an hour or two stretching the paper, and then I've got sheets of watercolor paper stretched, ready to go for the next month. Now, some people say, well, that's taking away from your painting time, but I work Monday to Thursday in an office in front of a computer. There's nights I come home and I just can't think about painting. My brain just doesn't want to switch over into creative mode. But what you need to do is you need to have something to do in line with your creative needs. So if I can't paint and I've got some stretching that I want to do, that's a couple of hours of constructive art related activity that I've done to keep me in the mindset and to keep me going. Other things that I do is I work on videos, I research, I check out and work towards what my next project's going to be. So if you can't paint, just try and find something to do which is related to it, and that's where stretching your paper like this comes into play, because it's just going to make life so much easier at the end of it. Also, I hate working with paper with buckles in it. I don't know whether that's a bit of an OCD thing, I don't know, but I just, it drives me insane when the paper starts buckling on me. The other good thing about this technique is that it makes it more affordable to use cotton paper, proper artist quality paper. I buy Arches in the packs. I normally get the 185 gram, which is the 90-pound paper, and I stretch it. And the reason I do this is because it works out about half the price of using the 140-pound or 300 grams per square meter paper, because you get twice as many sheets in the pack, and the packs are usually about the same price. And quite often, if you buy a pack, you'll get a discount from the art supply store that you're buying it from. Now, the beauty of that is that once you've got a painting, and this one didn't quite work, it's got gouache on it, I was trying something new, but you can see here, this is only 185 gram paper. It is dead flat. So what I can do, instead of totally soaking this paper, I can lay it on a board, spray it with the sprayer, let that sit for a bit to expand, and just do exactly the same process, and I can use this side as well. So you can get twice as many paintings when you're practicing by stretching your paper using the Ultimate Watercolour paper stretching technique, and it saves you money in the long run. Well, thanks for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed the video and learned something from it. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and also check out my website, darrelldowneyartist.com, and that's the same handle I use on Facebook and Instagram. Until next time, have a good day.